Perched on the north coast of Egypt, along the Mediterranean Sea, is the famed port city of Alexandria. Founded by and named for the Greek Alexander the Great, it has served as a major trading hub for almost 2,500 years. Well known for its lighthouse, one of the seven wonders of the ancient world, and its famed Library of Alexandria. But did you know that while Alexandria still carries on, an active seaport and tourist destination, its predecessor lies forgotten just 20 miles away? The Egyptians called it Thonis. The Greeks called it Heracleion. And in its day, a time before Alexandria, it sat like a beacon of prosperity, welcoming people from all over the ancient world into Egypt. Until it sank, literally and figuratively, out of sight, out of mind. Let's fix that. Hello, I'm Shayla Fontaine, and you're listening to History Fix, where I tell surprising true stories from history you won't be able to stop thinking about. I am back again this week with 4 more lost cities for you. If you missed last week's episode, that was part 1. We journeyed to the mythical but surprisingly quite real city of Troy in modern-day Turkey, the completely unknown and somewhat baffling city of Mohenjo-Daro in modern-day Pakistan, El Mirador, surprisingly advanced lost city of the Maya in Guatemala, and we ended at Pompeii, the ancient Roman city that was destroyed by the eruption of Mount Vesuvius in 79 AD. Go back and listen if you missed it. You don't want to miss those. However, this episode, while technically a part 2, does also stand alone. So no worries if you missed part 1, you're still in the right place. At the end of last week's episode, I called our first city today Heracleion. And I need to clear up some confusion over that name. So for a long time, people thought that there were 2 different cities close together. One of them they thought was called Heracleion, and the other was called Thonis. Now later, it became apparent when this city was rediscovered that it was just one city that went by 2 different names depending on who you asked. So the Egyptians called it Thonis and the Greeks called it Heracleion. So I'm going to call it, as do most sources, I'm going to call it Thonis-Heracleion. Same place, 2 names, okay? So this city, Thonis-Heracleion, it was founded around 700 BC, which puts it at predating its neighbor Alexandria by about 400 years. So 400 years before Alexandria was built in Egypt, around 20 miles northeast of the future site of Alexandria. That's where you'll find this city, Thonis-Heracleion. Its location is majorly important. It was built along the north coast, the Mediterranean coast of Egypt, just next to the mouth of the Nile River. And this poised it perfectly for trade. It was one of the major trading centers of the ancient world, welcoming people from all over into Egypt. Now, something you have to understand, ancient Egypt spanned an incredibly long time period. People first settled in that area in the Nile Valley over 13,000 years ago. And then just over 5,000 years ago, Upper and Lower Egypt unified into a single empire. That happened in 3100 BC. So for context, construction on the Great Pyramid began, we think, around 2500 BC. Thonis-Heracleion was not established until 700 BC. So you have to understand, to the people of Thonis-Heracleion, the Great Pyramid at Giza was almost 2,000 years old. It was as old to them as the Colosseum in Rome is to us. It was ancient to them already in 700 BC. So 700 BC Egypt is a different Egypt. It's a completely different world than 2500 BC Egypt because of ancient Greece, okay? Ancient Greece, the ancient Greek world officially began in 800 BC. And it fairly immediately became intertwined with Egypt because of trade. And so the purpose of Thonis-Heracleion there on the Mediterranean coast is to trade mostly with the Greeks, but also with just like whoever is coming through that port, okay? Jack Shanker writes for The Guardian, quote, "And yet, if you were a European merchant in the 5th century BC, an importer of grain, perfume, or papyrus perhaps, or an exporter of silver, copper, wine, or oil, then Thonis-Heracleion loomed large on your horizon. The same was true if you were a Carian mercenary, an educated Greek, a professional sailor, or a member of the pharaonic court. Scattered across a series of interlinked islands, sand, and mud banks, Thonis-Heracleion, part aquatic marshland, part urban sprawl, was ancient Egypt's bustling cosmopolitan gateway to the Mediterranean, and thus its nexus with the Western world." End quote. So, part aquatic marshland, part urban sprawl. I'm getting like New Orleans vibes, Venice vibes. This city was built on very low ground, essentially in the water in some places. Shanker describes its setup a little bit more, saying, quote, "Crisscrossed by a network of canals and dotted with harbors, wharves, temples, and tower houses, all joined together by a network of ferries, bridges, and pontoons. The city controlled most of the maritime traffic coming into Egypt from the Mediterranean. Goods would be inspected and taxed at the Customs Administration Center and then carried on for distribution further inland, either at Naucratis, another trading port that lay almost 50 miles further up the Nile, or via the Western Lake, which was connected by a water channel to the nearby town of Canopus and offered access to many other parts of the country." End quote. So we knew about Thonis-Heracleion a little bit. It had been mentioned by some Greek chroniclers. In Greek mythology, it was also the location of Heracles, aka Hercules' first journey into Africa. In Homer's story from the Iliad, the story of the Trojan War, it's the location where Helen of Troy and her abductor Paris hide out after she's been kidnapped. But that's not actually in the poem. Homer didn't write that. Both of these mythology references actually come from Herodotus, who was a Greek historian who I guess liked to dabble in mythology as well, just to make things extra confusing for us now. Anyway, we knew about it from these scarce references, but otherwise it mostly became lost to time. Because in around 700 AD, the once thriving port city of Thonis-Heracleion literally sank under the Mediterranean Sea, like Atlantis-style sank, except in real life. How does this happen? Well, it was a combination of factors that caused it. Earthquakes, soil liquefaction, rising sea levels, and the fact that the land they built it on was just already sinking into the sea to begin with. Shanker writes, quote, "By the 2nd century BC, Thonis-Heracleion's era of pomp and prestige was already fading. Further along the coast, the new metropolis of Alexandria was rapidly establishing itself as Egypt's preeminent port, while the hybrid foundation of land and water upon which Thonis-Heracleion was built had begun to feel less secure. It wasn't a single natural disaster, an earthquake, tsunami, rising sea levels, or subsidence that doomed the city, but rather a combination of them all. At the end of the century, probably after a severe flood, the central island, already sagging under the weight of the main temple buildings, succumbed to liquefaction. In what must have been a terrifying experience, the hard clay soil turned to liquid in moments, and the buildings atop it collapsed swiftly into the water. The supply of pottery and coins into Thonis-Heracleion appears to have ended at this point. A few hardy residents clung on to their homes throughout the Roman period and even into the beginning of Arab rule, but the last vestiges of the city sunk below the sea at the end of the 8th century." End quote. Just literally sank and was mostly forgotten about. Alexandria had taken over anyway. Who cares about Thonis-Heracleion? It wasn't until 1933 that a pilot flying over the area spotted ruins in the water. Sort of like with El Mirador from last week, it took the invention of flight for us to gain enough of a vantage point to be able to spot what was left. But then, nothing. I don't know if we just didn't have the technology in the 1930s to do anything about it or what, but excavations at Thonis-Heracleion did not start until the year 2000. And even when they did start, headed by the European Institute for Underwater Archaeology, they weren't even really interested in the ruins of Thonis-Heracleion at first. They came to check out some old French ships that had sunk in the 1700s. But soon, the focus shifted, of course, to the entire sunken ancient Egyptian city there. So excavations are actually still ongoing at this site. According to Schenker, 95% of the area's urban footprint has not yet been explored. So much left down there yet to find. But they have already made quite a few incredible discoveries. Massive, colossal statues of kings and queens, carved steles, a huge granite statue of Hapi, who is like this river god of fertility, who once stood at the entrance to the Nile River. And a lot of smaller things as well, goblets, little figurines, jewelry, coins, ritual objects, ceramics, animal sarcophagi. There's a lot of evidence there of this sort of blending of Greek and Egyptian cultures as well, which we know happened at this time. We find anchors from Greek ships and Greek-style helmets embedded in the sea floor. There's a lot of Greek coins, perfume bottles from Athens. And there's a lot of evidence that Thonis-Heracleion was a massive seaport at one point, which we kind of assumed, but now we have like hard evidence to prove that. They've discovered more than 700 ancient anchors under the water there, and as many as 125 shipwrecks dating from the 6th to 2nd century BC. So if there are, just think about it, if there are that many ships that wrecked there at the port, imagine how many traveled there that didn't wreck. It's just absolutely bustling in its time. Thonis-Heracleion was taken down by natural forces, right? The land upon which it was built literally sank into the sea. Schenker writes, quote, "At a time of looming ecological catastrophe, it is perhaps unsurprising that we should find the tale of Thonis-Heracleion so fascinating. Its rediscovery is a testament to advanced technology and human ingenuity. But the city's fate and the eerily inanimate memories of a long-forgotten urban life left behind are a reminder of how fragile many of our own contemporary cities are." End quote. It disappeared because it literally sank, but I think it disappeared figuratively as well from our collective memory because of something else. Because of the Greeks, because of Alexandria. Alexander the Great conquered Egypt in 332 BC, which is also around the time that he built the city of Alexandria. And here we see a major shift happen in Egypt. We see a fusion of Greek and Egyptian cultures, religion, customs. By the time Thonis-Heracleion sank, they didn't need it anymore. They had Alexandria. Alexandria was better anyway. It was more Greek. So they just moved on and put it behind them where it remained until those excavations began in 2000. And there's still so much more to uncover and learn there. 95% untouched. Fascinating. For our next city, we have to go to Jordan. Where the heck is Jordan, right? Jordan is in the Middle East, right next to Israel and Syria and Iraq. So not a great tourist destination really at the moment, but this is the cradle of civilization. My husband Joey actually brought this up the other night randomly. He was like, why are the places where human civilization literally began also the places where modern human civilizations are struggling the hardest, right? Like Africa and the Middle East, it's just constant chaos over there. And I think that's a very complicated question with a very complicated answer. That mostly has to do with foreign invaders and conquest, but I don't have time to dive into that right now. But just, something to think about, something he had mentioned that's been on my mind. Anyway, in Jordan, we have the ancient, not really all that lost city of Petra. This is one we'll call only lost to white people. It's probably offensive. Only lost to the Western world then. Western world is like the PC term for white people. All the white people countries. So we'll go with that. I mean, there are non-white people living in those countries too. So yeah, it's a more inclusive term. This one was only lost to the Western world. Petra was the capital city of the Nabataean people, an Arab tribe who lived in this area and started building Petra around 300 BC. But they really flourished around the turn of the millennium. What do you call that? They really flourished around the time that BC turned into AD, Jesus time, right? Now, Petra, what's left of Petra today is all of these facades carved into the sandstone. Like they're just like the fronts of buildings. They're amazing. They have columns and all this intricate architecture. They're very intricately carved into this like cliff faces, these sandstone rock faces. And they have interior spaces too, though, these rooms. They carved like rooms out of the rock behind the facades as well. And there are a lot of tombs like this carved out into the rock too. But that's mostly all that's left, some 600 stone facades. But at one point, there would have been a lot of freestanding buildings as well, houses and whatnot. Now, these are gone now. These were mostly destroyed by an earthquake in 363 AD. But at one point, before that earthquake, it's believed that Petra was home to some 30,000 people. The earthquake leveled the houses, which is why only the stuff carved into the rock face remains. But researchers also believe that it destroyed the city's water-related infrastructure. Okay, so Petra is in the desert, big time. And so to get water there, the Nabataean people had to set up this water harvesting system. So they piped water from springs outside the city, and they carved channels into the rock to collect rainwater. But this system, like the houses, was destroyed by earthquakes. And so the city was gradually abandoned, right? If you can't get water in the desert, you can't live in the desert. So people likely moved to areas closer to those springs, to those water sources. The city was also taken over, though, by the Romans in 106 AD. So by the time it was abandoned, it was technically a Roman city. Foreign invaders and conquest. I told you. Also, natural disasters seem to be a running theme here. Anyway, Petra is one of those that local people continue to always know about because there it is, just like this huge stone carved facades full of columns in the middle of the desert. How can you not know about that? But the Western world mostly ceased to realize it existed. According to Carolyn Wilkie, writing for National Geographic, quote, "The ancient trade center once housed tens of thousands of people, but the city's population had long dwindled by 1812 when the Swiss adventurer Johann Burckhardt pretended to be a Muslim pilgrim looking for the tomb of the prophet Aaron and convinced a Bedouin guide to bring him to the city, which many Westerners had come to believe was a myth." End quote. Good old-fashioned ignorance and trickery. And so Petra was discovered by the Western world in 1812, which is, of course, why we know about it now, why I know about it now, I should say. Now, like Thonis-Heracleion, most of Petra remains unexcavated, and there are few surviving documents describing the people who lived there, the Nabataean people, which means that Petra remains sort of mysterious and elusive. Most of the archaeological remains in Petra are tombs because, they were built to last. They were like cut into the rock and all. They actually just discovered a tomb with 12 bodies in it in 2024 in the Treasury building, which is like one of the main facades. Like if you Google Petra, it's one of the main images that you'll see pop up. So new discoveries yet, but for the most part, Petra is very untapped because of reasons that have to do with like preservation and whatnot. Let's get out of the desert, out of the Middle East, and head to the jungle once again, this time in Cambodia. Another, probably the most classic example of an only lost to the Western world lost city is the city of Angkor. Angkor was the capital of the Khmer Empire. So if you've heard the word Khmer before, it's probably because you listened to episode 72 about the Khmer Rouge, which was a violent communist revolutionary group that rose to power in Cambodia in the 1970s. It's actually one of my most listened to episodes. If you missed it, it's probably also one of the heaviest and most shocking content-wise, so you've been warned. Anyway, the Khmer Rouge was called that, Rouge because of red, because of the communism, but Khmer as a reference to the Khmer Empire, which once flourished in Cambodia from around the 800s to around the 1400s AD. So in that window, the Khmer Empire built the city of Angkor as their capital city. According to Grant Olson, writing for the Natural History Museum of Utah, quote, "The vast metropolis of Angkor served as the center of a mighty Khmer Empire from the 9th to the 15th centuries. It covered 154 square miles and is home to 72 major temples and hundreds of smaller temple sites. The most famous is Angkor Wat, which was constructed to represent the Hindu universe. Spanning 400 acres, this awe-inspiring site is considered the world's largest religious monument." End quote. But it might actually be even larger than that. In 2007, an international team of researchers clocked Angkor, including its urban sprawl area, at around 390 square miles. And this made it the largest, by surface area, the largest pre-industrial city in the world. This size alone meant that it had to have an elaborate and advanced infrastructure, like complicated water management network that allowed for irrigation in order to sustain an estimated 750,000 to 1 million people. Kind of like with El Mirador. You wouldn't think it now because it's been sort of reclaimed by the jungle. Angkor in particular has these massive vines and tree roots and whole tree trunks and things growing through and on top of the buildings. The jungle is actually grabbing on and trying to swallow the ruins of the city whole. So that gives it this sort of primitive, long forgotten vibe. But in its prime, just like El Mirador, Angkor was this extremely advanced, sprawling metropolis with this really advanced infrastructure that could support a lot of people. Now, it was eventually abandoned in the 1400s because of a number of factors, including climate change and invasion from outsiders pressing in. Now, here's the thing about Angkor, though, and Grant Olson is quick to point this out in his article. Angkor was never actually lost. The people of Cambodia always knew it was there, and they visited it frequently to connect with their Khmer ancestors. Olson writes, quote, "As with other supposedly lost ancient cities, Angkor was discovered by a Westerner who received guidance from locals. In other words, Henri Mouhot, the French explorer who sometimes received credit for finding Angkor, could more accurately be described as one of its first tourists. But the fact that people in the Western world were unaware of an ancient city's existence has traditionally been an adequate reason for them to dub modern visitors as discoverers. And it discredits the knowledge and traditions passed down by indigenous peoples. All that matters in the common yet inaccurate Western narrative is that a great civilization once existed and an explorer was intrepid enough to bring it to the world. Searching the phrase Lost City of Angkor in Google serves up more than 2 million results, many of which perpetuate the myth of a city that vanished from the face of the earth until it was discovered in the 1800s. Whereas Angkor is both a window into a rich past and a living space where people carry out a way of life directly related to their Khmer ancestors." End quote. So the story goes that this French explorer and naturalist, a guy named Henri Mouhot, air quotes, discovered Angkor in the mid-1800s. What actually happened was, in January of 1860, Mouhot made his way to Angkor while exploring Cambodia. Angkor was already in charted territory. It was already on Cambodian maps. Everybody knew that it was there. Mouhot goes there. He records in his journal over a period of 3 weeks detailed observations about the city, which is now in ruins, its palaces and temples, pools and moats and terraces, and he records all this with illustrations. And this later gets published back in the Western world, and people are like, what? What is this amazing place no one even knew about in the jungles of Cambodia that Henri Mouhot totally discovered? And they have to be eye-rolling so hard in Cambodia because they all already knew about it. They just didn't bother to tell the white people. But so because of that, there is this misconception that the French, specifically Henri Mouhot, discovered Angkor in the 1860s. Nope. Mouhot just happened to write about it and draw nice pictures to go with it, which captured people's attention for the first time ever and made them realize that it existed. But although it was never really lost, there is still a lot to learn about Angkor, a lot to discover in the true sense of the word discover. Olson concludes, quote, "While there may not have been a true discovery of Angkor in the 1800s, there are still countless mysteries being uncovered as experts from Cambodia and around the world study the site and seek the knowledge of the modern Khmer people." End quote. Seek the knowledge of the modern Khmer people. Yes, thank you. These people are still here. They did not get abducted by aliens or vanish into some mysterious green mist. They still live there. They know things. Ask them. It's just like with the Maya in Guatemala. They aren't this mysterious group of people no one knows anything about. They still exist. Go ask them. Stop trying to turn everything you don't personally understand into some big mystery. It's okay to not know. It's okay to ask people who don't look like you even to share their knowledge with you, because they have knowledge. They have valuable knowledge. And all of this comes from a historical disregard for the intelligence and a devaluing of the knowledge that these people hold, because they don't look like you. We got to move past it. Our final lost city, also not really lost at all, of course, is Machu Picchu in the mountains of Peru. Machu Picchu is the newest of our lost cities by a lot. It was built in the 1420s, which means it's like really not all that old at all. But it has this sort of ancient, mysterious air about it, not because it's actually all that ancient, but because it was built by a people that we neglected to get to know once again. And those people, of course, were the Inca. So there's the Aztec, the Inca, and the Maya, right? These are the three big major civilizations of the Americas, of Central and South America, at least when the Spanish arrived anyway. The Maya were much older than the other two. Okay, remember El Mirador was built in 1000 BC. Actually ancient. The Aztec and the Inca were much more recent. The Aztec Empire emerged in the 1400s, basically just by conquering and combining a bunch of smaller groups in the area of Mexico. And the Inca Empire down in South America started unofficially in the 1200s, but officially in the 1400s as well. So these guys popped up right before the Spanish conquistadors came over. They hadn't been there long, not on that scale, not as major organized empires. I don't think many people realize that. I think people assume that the Aztec and the Inca were these ancient civilizations. Nope. No, they were up and coming during the Renaissance in Europe. They're not that old. Machu Picchu is seen as rather mysterious. It's often referred to as the lost city of the Incas, because we don't know a whole lot about it. It's believed to have been built as an estate for the Inca Emperor Pachacuti, but we aren't sure because there aren't any contemporary records to confirm that. So the Inca didn't have a written language in the traditional sense. They used a system of knotted strings called quipu to convey mostly numerical information. They may have also conveyed some narrative information with the quipu, but most of that was likely passed down through storytelling. So we don't have the Inca writing down that Machu Picchu was built for this Emperor Pachacuti. That doesn't exist. We do know that it was abandoned only about a century after it was built in the 1500s. Radiocarbon dating has confirmed that. We don't know for a fact why it was abandoned, but the circumstantial evidence is screaming that it was because of conquest by the Spanish. I mean, it's pretty obvious. Spain conquered the Inca Empire starting in 1532, which lines up perfectly with evidence from radiocarbon dating that says Machu Picchu was occupied between 1420 and 1530. So it's likely most of the people at Machu Picchu left because of Spanish conquest in other parts of the empire, and because of most of them dying of smallpox that was brought over by the Spanish. And the crazy thing to me is that now we're like, we don't know why they left. Who did they build the city for, and why did they leave it? It's such a mystery. Guys, why didn't you ask them? Why didn't you just ask them? This wasn't that long ago. The Inca didn't have written records for the most part, but the Spanish sure as heck did. They didn't write it down. Why didn't they write it down? Oh, because they never bothered to care enough to ask them anything about their way of life. Got it. So now we have this huge mystery once again, this mysterious lost city of the Incas that no one knows anything about. Once again, the local people of the area knew about Machu Picchu already, always knew about it, knew it was there, but it was discovered by the Western world in the early 1900s. First in 1902 by a Peruvian explorer and farmer named Agustin Lizarraga, and then again in 1911 by an American historian from Yale University named Hiram Bingham III. Yes, that was his name, Hiram Bingham III. And Bingham is the one, of course, who brought the ruins to international attention, who, air quotes, discovered them. It's believed that Machu Picchu was originally called Huayna Picchu, or even just Picchu. It straddles two mountain peaks, Machu Picchu and Huayna Picchu. Those are the names of the mountains. Calling it Machu Picchu after the larger of the two mountains, that was Bingham. He just picked that one and wrote it in his field notes or whatever. It probably wasn't even called that. Machu Picchu wasn't a huge city like Angkor or like El Mirador. It was more of a royal estate, as theorized but not confirmed. It was built in the classical Inca style with these big stones fitted together perfectly without using mortar. Buildings were also engineered to be earthquake resistant. And this very specific style of building is something that we, very interestingly, see repeated somewhat on Easter Island, on Rapa Nui, over 2,500 miles away, which serves as evidence that the two groups of people likely came in contact with one another. But that's episode 110. So Machu Picchu was small. It's estimated that only around 750 people lived there, and they mostly worked for the emperor, probably Pachacuti, who we think the estate was built for, because he was emperor at the time it was built, not because anyone bothered to ask. In later excavations, we have found the remains of some of these people, of course, who lived there. And studying the chemical composition of their skeletons has yielded some interesting results. So we've learned that they didn't live in that area for very long. They were brought to Machu Picchu to work from elsewhere, from all different regions of Peru. Many of them were from the coast. A lot of the remains show bone damage caused by a species of water parasite that is not found anywhere near Machu Picchu. And chemical analysis also shows changes in their diets. Many of them went from eating fish to eating corn. And then a lot of them also were eating fish and then eating corn and then eating fish and then eating corn. So this all suggests that these were essentially immigrants from coastal areas who moved to Machu Picchu, probably to work as support staff for the emperor whom the estate probably belonged to. And this might have also been seasonal work. Evidence suggests that while as many as 750 people may have lived there in the summer months, that may have dropped down to just a few hundred in the winter. So it's possible they even came to work for the summer, right? Like for the summer season, and then they went back to their homes, likely on the coast because of the fish that they were clearly eating. They also seem to have brought animals to Machu Picchu. Llamas and alpacas have been found, which are not naturally found at that high of an altitude. They're found in the mountains, but not quite as high as Machu Picchu naturally. They've also found the remains of guinea pigs, often in tombs. And so it's thought that these were part of like a ritual sacrifice offering at burials. And they've also found the remains of 6 dogs, which were buried along with their humans, which suggests that they served as companions. Very cute. But let's go back a little bit because there was a lot of controversy surrounding excavations at Machu Picchu. So Bingham, air quotes, discovered it, right? He starts excavating. He is sending all sorts of artifacts back to Yale University. But then this starts to cause problems with the Peruvian people who claim that the Americans are coming in and destroying their historic site and preventing the people of Peru from being able to get in there and learn about their own history. Which, I agree. That's totally what was happening. So all this sort of comes to a grinding halt. The locals basically kick Bingham out of Machu Picchu at a certain point. And by 1981, the government of Peru had declared Machu Picchu a historic sanctuary, and then it became a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1983. So today, Machu Picchu is Peru's most visited tourist attraction, and it brings in a lot of revenue to the country. But tourists traipsing through all the time, of course, causes issues with preservation of the site. It's not like officially at risk according to UNESCO, but it's like teetering on the edge of being an at-risk site. You know, in every single one of these 8 lost cities that I've talked about between last week and this week, they all fell to ruin because of one of 2 reasons, I'm realizing. So some of them had both of these reasons going on at the same time. It was either because of conquest by outside invaders or because of climate change or like natural disasters, environmental stuff. In the 4 lost cities that we talked about this week, the 4 that we talked about today, every single one of them experienced some sort of invasion, some sort of conquest by outside forces. So we have Thonis, right? It's an Egyptian city that was taken over by the Greeks, becoming Heracleion. We literally have 2 different names for it now because of this invasion. We have Petra, which was a Nabataean Arab city that was taken over by the Romans. We have Angkor, which was a Khmer city that was taken over by neighboring groups in Cambodia. And then we have Machu Picchu, which was an Inca city or royal estate or whatever. And the Inca Empire, of course, we know, was taken over by the Spanish. So I find myself now coming back to Joey's question from a few nights ago. Why are these oldest cradles of civilization, these places that humans were literally birthed out of as a species, why are these also the places that are struggling the most now? Why are they so riddled with controversy and violence and chaos at all times if they were at one point so conducive to human life? And I think the answer to that becomes obvious when you study the reasons for the downfalls of these, air quotes, lost cities. Conquest. No one wants to conquer places that aren't conducive to human life. These places flourished for reasons, and the same reasons that caused them to flourish also caused them to be invaded by other people who wanted to flourish too, and ultimately led, in many cases, to their demise. But the real lesson, I think, is just because something is gone does not mean that it's lost. And just because you didn't know about it doesn't mean no one else did either. We have to stop throwing the word discovered out so haphazardly, claiming to have discovered something that whole civilizations of people have already known about for millennia speaks volumes. And continuing to retell the stories as if they were actual discoveries, heralding guys like Christopher Columbus, Hiram Bingham, and Henri Mouhot as these heroic discoverers of untold wonders, only serves to perpetuate the Eurocentric cesspool they climbed out of. And wow, I was not planning to take it there this week. Guess I got a little lost. Thank you all so very much for listening to History Fix. I hope you found this story interesting and maybe you even learned something new. Be sure to follow my Instagram at History Fix Podcast to see some images that go along with this episode and to stay on top of new episodes as they drop. I'd also really appreciate it if you would rate and follow History Fix on whatever app you're using to listen, and help me spread the word by telling a few friends about it. That'll make it much easier to get your next fix. Information used in this episode was sourced from The Guardian, the British Museum, frankgaudio.org, National Geographic, the Natural History Museum of Utah, and Wikipedia. As always, links to these sources can be found in the show notes.